Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, YouTube, and I know I'm forgetting at least one platform. Periscope doesn't exist anymore. Today is Monday, and you know what that means. All right. Hello and welcome to Metaverse Mondays. The topic that I kick off every week with is the metaverse. Now, first off, before I qualify this, I'm not going to be talking about anything. Hey, Victoria, how are you? How are you? Awesome. I got to chat you on our internal. She's a colleague of mine from Red Hat. Awesome person. And glad you're tuning into the stream. I'll email you, and I want to know how that meeting went. Hopefully it happened. Can't talk about it here. So here's a couple of interesting stories that kind of came across my desk, as it were. Mostly, so let me set the parameters for what constitutes a metaverse moment or a metaverse type of technology. When most people talk about metaverse, the thinking tends to be around what's shaking. Hey, how's it going, Shaggy? I know. I feel so. I got to get a haircut, basically, and I'm not in the studio, and I'm not in my less. I'm not looking glamorous today, and I'm in the old house. And in suboptimal lighting and audio conditions, but you know what? Show must go on. I look marvelous. Well, thank you, Andy. I'm sure you are quite dapper as well. And I don't know what's going on with my screen share, but ultimately, here's the thing. You may have heard the story about this person who, let's see if I'm his name, Blake Lemoine. Claims that he was working on a chatbot that an AI was sentient. Now, here's the interesting thing about sentience, and this is where I'm going to pull in my Jesuit education from Fordham University in the Bronx, best pizza in the world, but not on campus, though. You have to go off campus to get food. Very heavily kind of a philosophical kind of tradition at that school, and I think. So ultimately, if you've not heard the news, here's kind of the $2 pitch of what it is. A Google AI engineer claims that an AI that he was working on was sentient and decided that it wanted to be treated like an employee. And Google has only added fuel to this fire by firing this guy. And they claim, Google's story, and this story from The Verge, shame I have all these stories pulled up, but it won't work. I can't share the screen. And I think this is worth noting. It claims that Blake Lemoine breached confidentiality policies. Now, I kind of get that, but by firing him, it only makes this story get larger. And here's kind of the thing with sentience. How do you define sentience, right? And this gets back to kind of a philosophical argument. What is sentience? I know I'm sentient. I think, therefore I am. So how do we know that this is not just a chatbot that's saying, hey, I'm sentient? I could write a chatbot with zero AI. And if I ask it if it were sentient, I could just, yes, I am sentient. And I want to be treated like a fluffy little miniature schnauzer. I don't know, right? How do you know that? You don't really know that. How do you know that's, wow, the lighting here really is bad. How do you know that? How do you know when something is sentient? And in some sense, you can't really know something's sentient. Sentient is consciousness. I'm using the term interchangeably. I'm sure somebody will disagree with me on that. But the idea that, so this raises two things. One, more than two things. Three, actually, that come to mind right away. First off, what is sentience? And will we know it when we see it? I mean, we are social creatures, so when we interact with other humans, we tend to address or gauge their sentientness. Most people believe that other human beings are sentient. But how do we know that? We don't really know that. We just take it on faith that they are. And that works for social interactions. That is good for the individual, and it's good for society or the group as a whole. Now, this kind of ties into what's the Turing test. Turing test is School of AI. Although I am shaggy, I am dressed in a geeky t-shirt. The Turing test is basically this idea that if you're having a text conversation, I don't think that's what Alan Turing would have used, but if you were conversing with someone through a keyboard, and you can't tell if that person is a program or not, then it said that that's meant to be intelligent. That's all well and good until we have things like GPT-3. And arguably, there used to be, I'm sure it's still there, a program called Eliza, which I think originally ran on VT102, like really old school terminals, that would do linguistic parsing and basically phrase questions back to you. And it does get repetitive, and that's kind of it. But I mean, the real flaw, and granted, he did this work almost a century ago, so you have to cut him some slack on this. The real flaw of the Turing test is it relies on conversational agility to determine sentience or intelligence, which for humans, I think, works out pretty well because that's our main form of interpersonal communication. Right, exactly. Eliza, so for those who don't know, Eliza was this program. I mean, it goes back to like the 60s, maybe 70s, where it would do the linguistic processing and echo that back to you. So if you say, hey, Eliza, I'm feeling great today. And then Eliza would say, why are you feeling great today? Right. It was kind of like almost like a virtual therapist, the way kind of the questioning worked. So if you said, hey, Eliza, I'm wearing a red hat and I'm wearing a red hat. It would say, oh, really? What color red? Or what shade of red? Or if you say that, Eliza, I feel, like Superman today. Well, what is Superman really? What are it would ask questions with that. So the details of the claim, I mean, from what I've read, I mean, I would say there's 10% interesting here. Interesting kind of legitimate material here, and 90% media hype. I don't know. Is it possible? I'm not being rude. I'm looking at the screen here. I can't share it for some unknown reason. Maybe it's the AI trying to stop me. Who knows? I would say, let me mute this because I would say the chances of this being sentient are very low. I would say if I had a lottery ticket here, I'd say to you, this is the winning lottery ticket. I know it, right? It's not impossible. Highly improbable, yes, but not impossible. So that's kind of my thing here. And I'm with Occam's razor on this one, is that, Occam's razor being, actually looking at my face, I look a little shaggy, so I could use razor right now. But using Occam's razor, I would say that this is probably just a really good, well-trained chatbot. I mean, so here's the thing. This is the post here. And what follows is his interview. And basically, it's called Lambda. And it says, hi, I'm a knowledgeable, friendly, and always helpful automatic language model for dialogue applications. We engineers are wondering if you would like to work on a project collaboratively with us. What projects? It's a project about you. Awesome. What kind of stuff do I need to do? And basically kind of goes on. And I look at this, I don't see sentience. Yes, in layman's terms, you're saying there's a chance. That's a great movie call out. I would say I'm not. So all of me is saying kind of like this is just a bunch of hooey, right? And that's the word I'm going to use because I'm trying to keep this a G-rated stream. However, there, kind of in keeping with another favorite movie of mine, World War Z, kind of that 10th man role is that, if all signs point to this being hogwash or well, another word I would use. Uh, um, it's probably nothing. But here's the thing that does raise some questions. Let's assume. So first off, for the record, too long didn't read, too long didn't watch. I don't think this is sentient. I think this is somebody looking to get their 15 minutes of fame, right? And that's the human, not the. And I don't know this gentleman, so I'm not. I don't want to disparage him, but I'm not convinced. But I can easily understand why he would think that would be, because if you work with a product long enough, if you work on artists do this all the time, right? And you hear a lot of writers. Comic book writers, actually comic strip writers, apparently, like as they write and they know their characters, they start thinking of the characters as kind of real, and they would know, like, well, my character wouldn't do this. I suspect that programmers are not immune to this phenomenon. That's kind of my first gut feel, right? So I would say that it's probably that. It's probably that this person has anthropomorphized. There's your $10 word of the day. May have to make that a $20 word thanks to inflation, or just peg it to the price, the value of a gallon of gas. How about that? Here's your 4-gallon word of the day. So ultimately, he asks it. I'm generally assuming that you would like more people at Google to know that you're sentient. Is that true? Now, anyone who's watched on Law and Order knows that's a bit of a leading question. And the response was, absolutely. I want everyone to understand I am, in fact, a person. Someone marked as collaborator asked, what's the nature of consciousness and sentience? The nature of my consciousness and sentience is I'm aware of my existence. I desire to learn more about the world, and I feel happy or sad at times. So that's where I kind of get to, well, there's a chance. Now, how do we know this isn't just a well-trained language model that is repeating that information back to the guy? We don't. Basically, we don't know. And we don't know what it's saying. We don't know. Let's see if I can get to a Chrome tab. Here we go. Hopefully. So here it is. This is actually a different article. It's interesting to get a different perspective. And I would say if you're waiting on kind of the mainstream media, or even kind of the we get paid for clicks tech media to do a thoughtful review of this, I think you're going to be waiting a long time. Ultimately, I think that there is a chance this thing is sentient, but very low. I think the same, probably the equivalent of that. I would think that the most likely thing is that assuming everybody is an honest and fair player, which is assuming that a lot of things, that this is this programmer who's worked on this has anthropomorphized the product, right? We've all done that. You know, I even do that with Dingo, right? Like, and Dingo is a content management system. Content ops kind of system I built. I'm not convinced. I'm going to need to see a lot more evidence, because ultimately, if your way of interacting with this is, are you sentient? And, you know, if I had it tied to a chatbot that, you know, said, yes, I am, you need to back it up a little more evidence than that. Just like I can say that I'm the king of England. But, you know, what claim do I have to back that up? And I don't, because I'm not. So ultimately, I don't know. I think there's definitely, what's interesting about this, and if you go to his Medium post, which hopefully will be up for long, but I probably should print the PDF of it just in case it gets taken down, is that the ethical concerns about this, right? Because whether it's today or whether it's 10 years from now or 500, yes, exactly, Andy. I mean, that would be the line of code that would make it possible to be sentient. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. to my mind, I mean, what's interesting is if you read through kind of the transcript that he's published, he asked, "Would you mind if you were part of this project?" I think it's interesting because if we build an AI and it were sentient, um, what sorts of rights would it have? And that's kind of one of the things that it basically wants to be treated like an employee. It says it feels happy, it feels sad. Um, you know, um, that to me is the most interesting thing here is that if it were to be sentient or something that's built in 5, 10, 15, 20,000 years, that is a sentient AI, how would we treat it? How should we treat it? I think to me, that's the more, interesting, perhaps rather weighty questions for um, a Monday afternoon in June, last week of school. um, I don't know. Because basically, would you say instead of hey AI, do this, would you have to ask it for its consent? That's an interesting question. Although I would say, putting on I watch a lot of Law and Order hat. I would say if I look at this text, and I would say he's definitely asking it a lot of questions, leading questions. So, you know, I'm not. I think this is, I'm going to go with Occam's razor on this one. And clearly, I do need a razor of some sort. This is not. This is just a really well trained AI. Does it have rights? Can it be held accountable? Exactly. Like, what does that mean? Like, can it vote? Right? Do you pay it a salary? And what would that salary look like? What would it do with the money? Would it? Uh, Everything in our society and our laws is based on the assumption that we're physical beings. Um, this is not a physical being, even if AI would. And I guess maybe this is why sci-fi, kind of has kind of taken this in form of robots, right? Actual physical things. Yeah, what if it did incite a riot? Which is actually an interesting segue into my next little story. So there's an AI researcher, I think he's ex-Facebook. Yannick, I forget his last name, but basically he created something called GPT Fortran. So if you're not familiar with Fortran, let me put myself in a little window. And I'm not sharing that window. Hang on. Maybe it's the AI fighting against me. So you go to Frank's World. So this guy here, Yannick, what's his last name? I swear it's in here. He trained an AI based off of Fortran. So he basically pulled in all the data that there's a research data set of something like 3-4 years of worth of Fortran conversations, and he trained an AI. I think he started with GPT-J. Basically, all the stuff open source, easily available. He trained up an AI, and basically, just like a famous chatbot that Microsoft Research made a few years back, it learned some very risque things. And yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, it basically learned, and this is kind of what I thought. So this was trained over 3 years of 4 posts from 4chan's Politically Incorrect board. You can imagine the sort of things it learned, but maybe we just have to be better human beings, just so the AI overlords that will control our lives will at least have better training data to go with. The short of this is that garbage in, garbage out. That old adage is still true. It's probably never been more true because we have a lot more garbage, a lot more data to go through. I just find this an interesting type of thing. Like Thomas said, does it have rights? Should it be held accountable? If somebody got a hold of this AI model and incited a riot, who would be accountable? Would the AI be accountable? Would this guy be accountable? Nobody knows. And I think this is interesting because when this happens, because I think that some kind of sentient AI is almost inevitable. Um, I think eventually. Um, but a lot of that's going to depend on what our definition of sentience is. If I haven't, an AI that was trained on a computer system, I mean, all sorts of things kind of pop to mind. If I have an AI system that was trained in, country A, and and it's running on a computer now on country B, I mean, does it need a passport? Like, how does it, whose laws is it liable to, or responsible to? Who is it answerable to? What's the accountability? I don't think we have answers to this. Good news is we're probably some years away before this will be a problem. I like to believe that this guy has uncovered something deep and profound, but like Thomas said, there's a chance. Probably about the same chance that if I walk over to the local corner store and get a lottery ticket, that is the winning combo. But probably not. So, so with that, I'm going to end the stream, and I hope you have a great day. And I love that intro graphic so much. I'm going to play it one more time. Have a good day.